The second scripture lesson is a continuation of the story we began earlier in Matthew 21. This time, finishing with verses 10 through 17, page 802. When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth, in Galilee." Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple, and he overturned the tables of money changers and the seats of those who had sold doves. He said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer,' but you are making it a den of robbers." The blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he cured them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the amazing things that he did, and heard the children crying out in the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they became angry and said to him, "Do you hear what these are saying?" And he said to them, "Yes. Have you never read, 'Out of the mouths of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise for yourself'?" And he left them and went out to the city of Bethany and spent the night there.
I invite you to be in the spirit of prayer with me. Holy God, we have heard the words of the gospel, the story of Palm Sunday. And I pray that in any way that if I might add anything to them by the words that I share, the thoughts that I pray that you have given me to share, that you would bless these words for your glory and not mine. That these words may bring us closer to a walk with Jesus as we enter into this holiest of weeks. We pray these things in his name and to his glory. Amen. Well, you know that every year, on the Sunday before Easter, we read a passage from one of the Gospels that tells us of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. It's known variously as the triumphal entry, Palm Sunday procession. You know, in the past we've had children parading around the church, waving their palm branches. We sing upbeat hymns. It's a good day. It's a glorious, happy occasion that we are celebrating today. We readily will pick up our palms and we'll wave them with the children and the people on the streets of Jerusalem. We willingly join with those praising Jesus and welcoming him into our city, into our lives, and into our worship. But many people, even many Christians, then seem to set Jesus aside until we find him again a week later in a garden, standing outside an empty tomb, basking in the light of resurrection. Another joyous occasion. What happens in between? Sadly, many well-meaning Christians prefer not to follow the whole story. It's not an easy story. Yes, we all know about the crucifixion on Friday. Mel Gibson, in R-rated fashion, made sure of this in The Passion of the Christ movie. And we all know about the resurrection on the following Sunday. There are those who have heard about Maundy Thursday, often referring to it as Monday Thursday, which confuses them. It doesn't make any sense to them. By the way, Maundy comes from the French word meaning commandment. It's all about the Last Supper, Jesus giving a new commandment. Many are familiar with the Last Supper, mostly through Da Vinci's painting. If you hadn't heard of it before, Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, we certainly do now. But what about Monday? What about Tuesday and Wednesday? Unless you're a member of a religious order, even as Christians, we tend not to spend much time with Jesus during these days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. In choosing so, though, I believe we miss the full experience of what it means to be a disciple, what it means to really follow Jesus. So what do you say? We take a walk with Jesus through the days of Holy Week. If we were to do that, first we would join him again on today, in the midst of today's events, the Palm Sunday procession. Many scholars, including Marcus Borg, some of you may have heard of him, suggest that we understand this procession into Jerusalem as a political act as much as a spiritual statement. Everything that took place that day intensified the political climate. From the uncontrollable response of the crowd to the very calculated actions and choices that Jesus made that day, these incited the political elites of the city, both civil and religious. For in reality, there was little difference between the civil and religious authorities. The high priest was an appointee of the local government. Now, how many of you would feel comfortable joining a political protest? Not many of us. How many of you would, whether that political was pro-government or anti-government, whether it was pro-life or pro-choice, it doesn't matter. We're uncomfortable with that sort of a thing. Most of us are. How many of us would really feel comfortable protesting much of anything? Unless it's something happening in our own backyard. If we join Jesus for these events of Palm Sunday, that is just what we're doing, though. It wasn't a nice little children's parade that was happening that day with people smiling, waving their hands as the fire trucks and the antique cars and the local beauty queen passed by. It was a political act that incited the religious elitists and the occupying powers. Jesus was threatening the status quo that they had dedicated their lives to maintaining. So join him, if you dare, for his walk into Jerusalem on that Sunday. Just remember that Matthew tells us that the whole city was in a turmoil. Waking up the next morning, leave the comfort of your home, you go out to find Jesus, and you will make your way with him to the village, from the village rather, of Bethany, back into the holy city. And on your way, you may see a strange occurrence. Jesus stops to look at this certain fig tree along the way, and it's barren when it should be bearing fruit. Jesus curses it, and it withers. You think, that's very uncharacteristic of Jesus. What's going on here? From there, you go on to the temple. Mark is clear that this happens on Monday. Matthew isn't so clear about the day, perhaps even placing it on Sunday. You stare, dumbfounded and a bit nervous, as you watch Jesus walk right up the steps into the court of the Gentiles and commence to turn over the tables of those who were there to provide the pilgrims with their sacrificial animals. Jesus, what are you doing? Look out, there goes another cage. Doves are fluttering all about, coins rolling across the floor, voices raised in anger. Jesus forcefully proclaiming this place is little more than a den of robbers. So much for your plans for a nice quiet little breakfast before we go about making preparations for the celebration of Passover later in the week. It isn't long, and sure enough, the chief priests and other leaders of the temple elite arrive on the scene. They march right in there and they look at Jesus and say, "Who do you think you are?" And for the rest of the day, and in some versions of the Gospels on into Tuesday, Jesus debates with these religious leaders, and with every passing point that Jesus raises, they grow more and more furious. And you say, "Jesus, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And you look around, wait a minute, what's that? Where's that scribe heading off to? Snitch. We hear parables of vineyards, wedding banquets, 7 brothers, and a teaching on the resurrection. Another teaching on giving to Caesar and giving to God. And at one point you think the Pharisees have cornered him when they ask Jesus for his thoughts on which is the greatest commandments. And you think, with so many, he'll never choose the right one. They're sure to trap him here. But answering them, Jesus says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And you go, "Phew, Good answer, good answer. Yet that sigh is just to catch your breath. Then you hear Jesus go into an extended list of woes against the scribes and the Pharisees. He calls them every name in the book without explicitly using cuss words. Jesus, what are you doing? Such would be your Tuesday if you've chosen to walk with Jesus through the days between Palm Sunday and Easter. Wednesday rolls around. You think, we're getting closer to Passover, to the celebration. Finally, a quiet day back in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper. Except for this very curious incident. A woman comes into the house while you are reclining at table eating a meal. And she proceeds to pour a jar of very expensive ointment over him. A very large jar. The whole thing. What a waste, everyone is thinking. But it seems that the one most troubled by this is Judas Iscariot, for shortly after this he leaves to go someplace. But other than this minor little incident and Judas leaving in a huff, it was a rather uneventful day. Thursday, the Last Supper is known as, to us Christians, the Passover for Jesus and his disciples. They weren't thinking we're celebrating the Last Supper, it's the Passover for them. The high point of the year. We're gathering for, think of your Thanksgiving dinner or your Christmas dinner. Jesus announces in the midst of this dinner that he will be betrayed. To which everyone around the table claims, or do they ask, surely not I, surely not I, surely not me. Following the meal, we leave with Jesus. And if we're one of the privileged ones, he invites us to accompany him to the Garden of Gethsemane, where we are to watch as he prays. Can we watch? Can we watch? You ever had a child ask that, can I watch? Can I watch? And the natural curiosity, children are eager to watch and learn. How eager are we? Do we have what it takes to watch and learn? To wait upon the Lord, especially during the dark hours of the night. And it's early, the pre-dawn hours on Friday morning. Betrayal. Out of the bushes walks Judas with a contingent from the temple. They are carrying swords and clubs. You knew it. You just knew it. That little scene in the temple, all those things Jesus said about the scribes and Pharisees, right to their faces, the way he challenged the Sadducees' teaching on the resurrection, he should have known. Jesus should have known. Then there's the kiss of death. Watching in bewilderment as the beloved teacher is led away into the darkness. Betrayal is followed by denial and then a mockery of a trial. The sun comes up on Friday morning. From a safe distance, we watch in horror the teacher dragged through the streets, beaten, broken, whipped, a shadow of the man we thought we knew. The man who just earlier this very week stood his ground debating the scribes and Pharisees, who boldly faced them down in the temple, who turned over the tables of the money changers, who cursed the fig tree and caused it to wither, who healed the lame, who cured the lepers, who raised Lazarus from the dead. Jesus, what happened? A walk with Jesus this week will end up in this place with this question. What has happened? Eyes blinking in disbelief, minds numbed with confusion, hearts aching with disappointment, our courage sapped by the brutality of what we have witnessed. But it is a walk we must take if we are to truly, fully comprehend the wonderful news, the great reversal of the Easter morning message. How about you? Do you dare? Do you dare to follow Jesus through this week? If you do, perhaps you might consider joining us in the church vestry, when we will assemble as Jesus gathered his disciples around the Passover table for a meal, and he introduces them to a new commandment. This Thursday, Monday, Thursday, at 6 p.m. Do we dare to take a walk with Jesus throughout the days of this week?